After years of closing shifts, I'd become used to walking home alone late at night. The streets were usually empty, save for the stray cats darting between parked cars and the occasional flicker of a street lamp. I'd take the shortcut through Sycamore Park, a small stretch of trees that saved me a good 10 minutes off my walk. But that night, everything felt off. The air was thick, heavy with an uneasy quiet I couldn't shake. It was just past 3 a.m. and I was tired, my mind dulled by the long shift. I was halfway through the park when I noticed the silence. It was unnatural, a complete lack of noise, no wind, no rustling of leaves, not even the faint chirping of crickets. My footsteps were the only sound, echoing on the narrow path. I quickened my pace, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling clawing its way up my spine. A soft crunch broke the silence, and I froze. It was faint, like someone stepping slowly on dry leaves just a few feet behind me. I didn't dare turn around. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of how alone I was out here. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, but I couldn't ignore the prickling sensation creeping over my skin. I began walking faster, my pulse racing, footsteps echoing louder as if the entire park were amplifying them. Then I heard it again, another crunch, closer this time. My body tensed, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. I forced myself to glance back, but the path was empty, swallowed by the shadows of the trees. Yet I could sense it, a presence hiding just beyond my sight, watching me. I could feel the weight of its gaze, cold and oppressive. I kept walking, faster now, my breath shallow as my eyes darted over the path ahead. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the sounds, but something inside me knew with an unsettling certainty, that I was not alone. The temperature around me dropped sharply, and the air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and rot, like a crypt opened after decades. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, and just as I thought I might reach the edge of the park, another noise echoed, louder and clearer than before. It was a whisper, faint and distant, calling my name. The voice was soft, barely louder than a breath, but the sound twisted in my ears, pulling at something primal, something terrified. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel their intent, an insidious pull urging me to stop, to turn around. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. I forced myself to keep moving, every nerve in my body on edge. The voice grew louder, more insistent, and I could hear a faint, wet sound, like something dragging itself along the ground, inching closer and closer. My legs felt like lead, each step taking more effort, as if the ground was swallowing my feet. I turned a corner in the path, my heart leaping as I caught sight of the streetlights beyond the trees. Safety was just a few steps away, but as I moved closer, something blocked the way. A figure stood in the middle of the path, shadowed and motionless, wrapped in an aura of darkness. I couldn't make out its features, but I could see its eyes, glowing faintly, like embers buried in ash, piercing and relentless. The figure took a step toward me, and I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The whispering resumed, louder now, overlapping voices layered with anger, pleading, and something else, hunger. My legs finally obeyed my terror, and I turned, sprinting off the path, through the trees, my only thought to escape. Branches scratched my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I kept running, every step fueled by raw fear. I burst out onto the street, the warm glow of the streetlights feeling like salvation. I looked back, expecting to see it right behind me, but the path was empty. Only darkness lingered between the trees, thick and waiting. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. My breath came in gasps, my heart pounding as if it would tear through my chest. I checked every lock, every window, feeling the sensation of being watched long after I knew I was safe inside. But as I sat in the silence of my living room, catching my breath, I heard it again. Soft, distant, yet unmistakable. A faint whisper outside my window calling my name. I froze, every muscle locked in place as the whisper seeped through the glass, my name stretching into a drawn-out, chilling murmur. My pulse thundered in my ears as I forced myself to look at the window. Through the curtains, I could see a faint silhouette standing just beyond the glass, bathed in the hazy glow of the streetlight. It was the same figure from the park, shadowed and watching, its eyes glowing like dying embers. My skin crawled as the whispers grew louder, flooding my head with overlapping voices urging me to come closer. I backed away, clutching the edge of the counter, willing myself not to look directly into those eyes. But they seemed to see right through me, pulling me in, drawing me nearer without even moving. My body felt heavy, almost like I was being dragged forward against my will. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the whispering stopped. Silence filled the room, thick and unnaturally still. I blinked, my eyes refocusing, and the figure was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. The air lifted, returning to the usual late-night quiet of my apartment. I didn't sleep that night, but I kept checking the windows, expecting it to return. It never did, but sometimes, on nights when the silence feels too deep and the shadows too dark, I still hear it. A faint whisper, calling my name from somewhere just outside, waiting. Before we get into the next story, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. You may also share our stories with friends and family. Thanks. I'd been tending bar at the Howling Moon for 2 years, and every night was the same. Muffled conversations, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of the jukebox in the corner. But last Thursday was different. I remember every second of it, every sound, every chilling detail. It started with a heavy rain that hammered the tin roof above, drowning out the usual sounds and shrouding the place in a strange silence. There were only a few regulars left, nursing their last drinks, and as I glanced at the clock, I noticed it was nearly closing time. Then the front door creaked open. A woman stood there, soaking wet, her hair matted to her pale face. She wore a trench coat that clung to her like a second skin, her gaze unsettlingly empty and shadowed with a darkness deeper than mere exhaustion. Her steps were slow, almost reluctant, as if she had been drawn there against her will. The tension in the air thickened as she moved through the bar. Her footsteps were too loud for the empty room, each one ringing out as though amplified by something unseen. As she reached the darkest corner, I felt compelled to approach her, though a chill gripped my spine. I forced myself to act naturally, asking what she wanted, though I could sense something was wrong, an unnatural heaviness that permeated the air. She looked up, her eyes piercing as she spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Last call, for me." Her words came out layered, like multiple voices blending together in the silence of the room. There was an eerie reverberation to her tone, lingering as if the very walls absorbed and reflected it. I took a step back, unnerved, before quickly pouring her a whiskey and setting it down before her. She made no move to touch it, just stared at the glass, as though seeing something far beyond its amber surface. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the windows with a rhythm that seemed to mirror the growing unease within me. As the last patrons left, the bar became oppressively quiet, the silence pressing in from all sides. I wiped down the counter mechanically, trying to ignore the chill that had settled over the room. Then a faint whisper reached my ear. I froze, my mind racing as I tried to place the sound. A soft murmur, indistinct and distant, like voices speaking just beyond my reach. But I was alone. The other customers had gone and there was no one else here but the woman who sat motionless in her corner, staring at her drink. I resumed cleaning, attempting to calm myself, but the silence felt unnatural. My hand paused mid-wipe as a scream erupted sharp and raw, filling the space around me. It was abrupt, cut short as though choked off, yet the echo remained, ricocheting off the walls, thickening the air with its terror. My pulse thundered in my ears, each beat a drum of dread. I glanced at the woman, her expression twisted with sorrow and grief beyond anything I had seen. There was something broken in her face, an agony that seemed to consume her. Slowly, as if in answer to the silence, she lifted her gaze and spoke again, her voice hollow, almost resigned. "This is my last call." Her eyes locked onto mine, and I realized with a creeping sense of horror that she was not truly there. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, and her hands shimmered faintly, an otherworldly quality clinging to her. She appeared both there and not, her form shifting like smoke caught in the wind. I felt a chill seep into my bones, fear overtaking me as I grasped the reality before me. Her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with a cold that seemed to burn, an icy touch that pierced to the core. Her expression softened into something almost pitying, and her gaze held mine as she whispered, "You don't want to be here after the lights go out." In a blink, she was gone. The whiskey glass remained, untouched, still glinting faintly in the dim light, but the corner where she sat was empty. My breath came in shallow gasps, the silence deafening, as I struggled to regain my composure. I finished closing in a daze, my mind racing with images of her face, her warning echoing in my thoughts. Outside, the rain pounded against me, cleansing me of the claustrophobic dread that had filled the bar. But even as I escaped into the storm, her final words stayed with me. The next morning, desperate for answers, I asked around town, speaking to anyone who might know of a woman fitting her description. Some shrugged, but one old bartender listened, eyes widening as he nodded slowly. "The last call lady," he called her. "A spirit doomed to haunt those who stayed past closing," he said. She was there to warn them about the spirits that couldn't leave.